Everyone in our audience are playing pickleball or paddleball, but everybody's getting injured.
I love the fact that people are playing it.
Yes.
We're just not prepared. And that's what we're talking about here, is that when you sit down, your core, your glutes, they all switch off. Yep. So you're detuning over time your stable base, and that's what gives your back support, your particular low back. On the weekends we do explosive activities, but the foundation's not in place, so you're going to get injured. And you'll see most of the injuries are things like rolled ankles, twisted knees, things like that. And that's because we're just so unstable on one leg. A lot of what you do on that pickle or paddle court is off one leg. If you're not strong on one leg, you're not strong, and you don't develop power. Movement is at the core of everything. Movement is at the core of cognitive function, it's the core of longevity, it's at the core of internal health.
You give me like 3 or 5 ways that we can all move more.
3 or 4 wall squats, you can do a couple of little lunge steps, you can do a couple of little high knees, and brilliant. Suddenly you've re-triggered your brain, you've stimulated blood supply, you've got your muscles working, the joints are suddenly opened out.
What do you think the normal person, the corporate athlete as you call it, what should they be training for?
Improving performance at work. Their work involves a lot of cognitive function, and cognitive is linked to physical. So they've got to get the physical right before they can really get their cognitive. Your body is a gymnasium in itself. You don't need a gymnasium. So the majority of what we ate was actually hunted or killed, predominantly carnivorous. Look at where we are in comparison to that. The way our pancreas functions and its job and its role in protecting us against blood glucose, we just don't cope. The other thing that was quite frightening for me is over the last 10 or 15 years, we do blood samples of all our athletes, all our cricketers. 18 to 20% of that cohort of some of your most physical beings on the planet are pre-diabetic.
Most people are training for, they have a goal sometimes, like a wedding or a holiday, or because the doctor told them. What do you think the normal person, the corporate athlete as you call it, what should they be training for?
Improving performance at work. Their work involves a lot of cognitive function, and cognitive is linked to physical. So they've got to look at their physical status and their physical performance first in order to drive a better cognitive outcome. And physical means not just on the training side, but also on their fueling side. So fueling and movement are going to be the 2 key ones for them in order to improve their cognitive outcomes. So the corporate athlete does have stressors that are probably greater than a lot of our athletes. And if we don't address that, and those stressors are beyond what we call the threshold of being good stresses, then they're going to need a recovery strategy as well.
Which they don't have, because
they don't have.
90% of people who have high performance jobs, they don't have a downtime, recovery. They don't have you telling them about recovery. So they're working the whole day, they're stressed the whole day, which is a bad stressor.
Exactly.
Terrible environments, air conditioned, sitting the whole day. So
that's the key. If they want to improve this, they've got to improve physical, fueling, and recovery.
And when you say physical, what would be the physical qualities that you think are the most important for everyone who has a sedentary lifestyle, like all of us?
Do the opposite of what we're doing right now. Just get up and move. You just have to. Everyone talks about the mobile phone. It's called a mobile phone for a reason, is that we're supposed to be mobile when we're on the thing. And I laugh when people are on their mobile phones but sit down.
Right.
There's an opportunity to get up and walk around your desk and sit back down. So we just don't move enough. So whatever that means.
I like that. I do it all the time. The minute I'm on a call, I'm just get up and I walk. I just jump up, like a rabbit.
There you go.
I walk up and down, no matter how big the room is.
And we see that in the way you are.
You think?
And that's not just because you're lean, but because you have energy. I mean, you have an energy about you. And I'm sure part of that is because you move. And my number one message to anybody is move more. So movement is at the core of everything. Movement is at the core of cognitive function. It's the core of longevity. It's at the core of internal health. It's the core of communication. Most people think better and communicate better when they're moving.
So could you give me like 3 or 5 ways that we can all move more?
Pretty well everybody gets a lunch break. And, what do we do in our lunch breaks? We stay seated and just eat our lunch at our chairs. But again, there's a short opportunity there. And movement doesn't mean going out and walking for 20 minutes, half an hour. It just means literally getting up. And there are 2 or 3 things that even standing next to your desk you can do. You can do 3 or 4 wall squats. You can do a couple of little lunge steps. You can do a couple of little high knees. And brilliant. Suddenly you've re-triggered your brain. you've stimulated blood supply, you've got your muscles working, the joints are suddenly opened out. So stairs are an amazing exercise medium. Even going downstairs, believe it or not, is beneficial because we use muscle completely differently when we go down than we're going up.
Right.
So even if it means starting by going down the stairs at work instead of coming up and eventually progressing to that. So stairs, whenever you're on your mobile phone, just get up and walk around your desk. But use always this concept of your body is a gymnasium in itself. You don't need a gymnasium to be fit.
That's what a lot of people say, I don't have time to go to the gym.
Yeah. You can do a couple of mobility stretches, thinking about when you're sitting, what muscles are shortening, particularly our hip flexors, our spine, all these things that become compressed and shortened, and just getting up and doing the opposite, doing a couple of back stretches, doing a hip flexor stretch, which takes, 10 seconds. And then you're resetting everything for your next seating journey, which might be the next hour or so. But I just don't think we're aware of how that cumulative load over time impacts us negatively.
Could you tell us a little bit about that? I've heard various studies. How bad is sitting over time?
Most people have manifested themselves in posture concerns or posture problems. Headaches, forward chin postures, low back pain, shoulder pain, limited range of movement with their shoulders, and neck pain being probably the major one. And all that is posture. That's driven by poor posture or sustained postures over long periods of time. So you just got to realize what are the postures that I'm in, reversing those. And it only needs to be a short, not even a minute of reversing each one of those postures, doing a few chin tucks, getting up, doing some back extensions, the reverse of what you're doing when you're sitting, and then sit back down again. And it's amazing how that can just break that posture cycle. Spinal loading so when we look at intradiscal pressure, so the pressure inside the intervertebral disc between your spine, when you go from lying to standing to sitting, so let's say for argument's sake that the pressures inside your disc are 10 units when you're lying down. It's pretty similar when you're standing, because when you stand up, you engage your core muscles and they brace and support the spine. So let's say it's 10 or 15. When you go to sit, it goes to about 9-fold.
Wow.
The pressure within the disc, particularly if you're slouch sitting.
Got it.
So even the way you sit and sitting posture then determines a lot of things. But the best way to counteract that is to get out of those postures for short periods.
Because the pressure builds up.
Exactly. It's cumulative.
It's 9x, huh?
9x to go from standing to sitting.
And standing is fine. Standing is...
Yeah, because when you stand up, everything engages. All the muscles switch on in order for you to stay upright.
Just
core
relax,
switches on. Because when you sit down, your core effectively switches off.
Right.
So the core is your shock absorber for your spine. Think of it like a bamboo structure around your spine. But when you stand up, it's strong. When you sit down, it's not there. Okay, so you lose this shock absorption through your spine.
So when you're sitting down, your spine is taking the full load.
The
your muscles are dead.
Your disc is taking the full load.
Disc, right.
Your intervertebral disc is taking the full load.
One more thing you spoke about was power. You said, I think we mentioned once, you said power is very important, more than strength. Can you tell us the difference between strength and power?
Yeah, I think what we look at now, particularly when just put it into a sporting context, so people look at the modern day IPL game and cricket and, my God, these guys, they've got so much power, Power is the extension of strength. It's putting strength into practice, so to speak. But power is not only a derivative of how strong you are, it's actually how stable you are. So it's one thing to be the strongest guy in the room who generates the most power when we do all the testing. That's useless if you can't put it into hitting balls out of the ground. That power becomes utilized to its fullest when it's working from a stable base. And that's why we spend so much time on working on our core muscles. Again, same conversation. On our core muscles, on our glute muscles, and how stable we are, particularly when we're on one leg. If you think about, and we don't think about this often enough as normal as individuals, is that pretty much everything we do, we're on one leg. Half of our gait cycle is on one leg. Anything we do in sport, particularly in cricket, it's on one leg. You push forward off one leg, you take off on one leg, you land on one leg, you dive off one leg, So we don't spend enough time training single leg activities. So therefore being strong on one leg as well as two legs. So when you get into the gym, don't always just do double leg loaded stuff. Actually do some more single leg loaded stuff.
Like what would be good? A single leg squat?
Single leg squats, single leg hops, single leg step ups, single leg lunging, wall lunging, wall squatting, things like standing on one leg, balance exercises that we talked about before, rotation work off one leg, resistant bands, all these things, because if you're not strong on one leg, you're not strong. And if you're not strong, you don't develop, and you don't have a strong base, and you don't develop power. So that for me is the key. And that's what we're talking about here, is that when you sit down, those muscles that I've just talked about, your core, your glutes, they all switch off. So you're detuning over time your stable base. And that's what gives your back support, your particular low back, its stability and its support. And then we go out and on the weekends, we do explosive activities. I want to take up paddle, and I want to do piddle, and I want to do this and whatever. But the foundation's not in place. So you're going to get injured. You're going to get injured.
So I want to start with Rajasthan Royals and the way you look at a body in Rajasthan Royals, because you have, a 15-year-old player like Vaibhav Suryavanshi, and then you have, a lot of 30-year-old players as well. And
30 plus.
30 plus, exactly. So before you even think about training them, how do you read these bodies?
Yeah, I think the big difference we've made now is we treat everybody as an individual, because you can't train a 15-year-old the same way you train a 35-year-old, and you can't train a batsman the same way you train a fast bowler. So everything's very individualized, but that comes on the back of insight. I can't deliver a program or some sort of training regime if I don't know that individual inside out. And I'm not talking just physical parameters. I'm talking their mental capacity, their durability, their resilience, their history. So a whole program is built around insights. So that's where technology becomes a really good friend of ours. So there's a lot of individual testing that goes on. And so that's intrinsic testing, extrinsic testing. And then most of the value I get out is from history. What's their history? What's their upbringing? What's their injury histories? Their age, their sex? All these things play into it. What role they play, and on the back of that, we build out a risk profile for that individual across. I think it's about 10 or 12 parameters that we assess them on. Lifestyle being one of them, because that does impact risk. And once we build that out, we can then look where their deficits are, where the deficiencies are, and therefore the potential for injury or performance fluctuations going forward. And then a program is built individually for them. So Suryavansh's program, and obviously he's still a minor, so I can't comment specifically on him. But when you train any child, you must not filter out the fun piece, because they're still a kid. He's still 15 years old. Okay, so fun has to be at the core of everything he does. But one eye also on performance and protecting him in the performance arena. So we still need to build some sort of training strategy around him, but it's obviously very different to the one that we're doing for a 30 plus experienced cricketer. So the main consideration for a tournament like the IPL is environmental. People don't realize just how big the environmental impact is on a player in India in that time of the year. So most of it is around recovery. Right. So one is preparation, and that's a really key part of it. That's where I learn about the player, where we build all the programming into them. Performance day, what happens on the day of performance, which is the things like nutrition, their fueling, their hydration, warm-ups, et cetera. But then we post-event, we come into the real secret sauce, if you want to call it that, is the recovery piece. And that is where we've really drilled down. And that's where someone like a 15-year-old athlete is where we spend most of our time actually, is in the recovery piece, particularly in India, and in the environment and the weather we have during an IPL tournament and the intensities of a tournament like that.
Right.
And I always use this analogy around Formula One. And if you look at a Formula One environment and then you look at your road car, everything that's pioneered in the Formula One space in terms of performance, safety, your traction control, your turbo, all of that was pioneered and invented, so to speak.
ABS.
Exactly. All started in Formula One, but eventually ends up in your road car to benefit you, to make your car safer, more efficient, more fuel efficient, etc. Very similar to the way I look at performance and high performance sport and elite sport is that all the learnings that we pioneer in that space, and most of the innovations and pioneering in physiology and performance medicine starts there, because we're trying to break barriers, we're trying to push boundaries, we're trying to improve performance. But actually, a greater benefit from those insights and understandings would probably benefit the general population more. So I think it's really important that I, at some level, and even you now, be a conduit for those learnings to come back and benefit a far greater population, particularly somewhere like India, where we do have significant health problems,
right,
and things that we can make changes to.
You spoke about you use several parameters to assess a player. I said 10 to 12, which is a lot, I know. Yeah. What would be the top 3 parameters that you think that you use to assess a player's fitness that would be relevant to us?
Yeah. Relevant to you, lifestyle number 1, because that's the thing that not only impacts you most, but also you can impact and change as well if you're so inclined. The other one really is getting an understanding of where your current fitness status is and being realistic about that. And I know a lot of people take up all these sports because it's at an older age, and I think that's fantastic. I'm not going to stop it. But are they actually prepared or adequately prepared to do that? So I think having a realistic understanding of where you are and you're in your own fitness journey currently, and then I think the history. So training history tells me a lot. If you've got a really strong training history, you've grown up in a really strong, robust physical education system, then obviously that allows you to be better adapted and possibly more resilient. We can talk about resilience later on, but I think that puts you in a better stead to be not just a better athlete, but a more resilient, less injury-prone athlete as you get older. So they're probably the 3 key ones.
What would you think on a physical level, other than the bloods, are for our audience, things, you have a 30-year-old, 40-year-old, 50-year-old, 60-year-old in our audience. Yeah. What are things that they should test to see how they are physically, other than doing bloods and everything?
Yeah, so mobility is one. So flexibility and mobility is another one, which is an indicator of poorer control over your lifestyle. Because if you have poor control over lifestyle, which means you're sitting a lot, you're sedentary, you're overweight, mobility and flexibility is one of the first things to go. And also because it impacts your collagen and therefore muscle, et cetera, et cetera.
Any specific mobility exercise that tells you, when you look at someone that,
can you still touch your toes? Can you, so it really basic stuff.
Oh, really?
We do sit and reach tests, and but somebody, able to bend over or not and touch the toes, which they used to do 10 years ago versus not now. You got to ask the question, why can't I do it now? And is there a way around that? Can I change that? So that's a big one. Grip strength is another one.
So how can someone test their grip strength?
Yeah, there's a little thing called a handheld dynamometer, which, you could pick them up from most pharmacies, to be honest. It just measures in either force in newtons or in pounds.
That's an important indicator.
Yeah, and what you want to do that is use it as a marker. Get a baseline and use that as a marker. And there are certain parameters that certain age groups should be within in certain cohorts. What you want to do is get a baseline and then just see if you're changing. But then set out on a resistance training journey, because we know that improves so many things, not just by the fact you're getting stronger and improving your grip strength. But when you exercise larger muscle groups, you improve insulin resistance, exactly what I just talked about before. Right. One of the remedies for insulin resistance is building a resistance training program, because it makes your system more sensitive to insulin. And, your muscles require more fuel, which means you need more insulin sensitivity to get it into the muscle to be converted to glycogen to use as energy. So I think resistance training would be the thing that anybody over 40 should be bringing into their daily program, irrespective of your male or female. I think resistance training in some form. And the other one is also, particularly for our female cohort, is body weight training. So being and weight bearing training. So being on your feet, because bone health is dependent upon forces going through the bone to help remodel bone. And again, because we spend so much time sitting, we're always in the cars, we're never, you'll see one of the main causes of osteopenia or earlier onset of osteopenia and therefore osteoporosis is because of limited weight bearing these days. So graded controlled weight bearing exercise is critical to bone health. And the other thing that's really interesting around bone health, which there's been some decent studies around this, was particularly in the subcontinent where we see high ratios or higher levels of osteopenia, particularly
in India,
in our female cohort, as they get older. One of the things I think of is because of the more highly acidic diets, particularly because of the higher oil content in the foods. And what happens is when the body becomes more acidic, it then goes hunting for things that can try and balance it out and make it more alkaline. And what's the most alkaline structure in the human body?
Calcium.
Is bone, exactly. Yeah. So the best way to protect yourself is to build muscle and to build balance. Because if you're less likely to fall in the first place, you're less likely to fracture something. We don't do enough work on balance with our elderly population. So balance training is critical for them. In order to do that properly, they need to be stronger. So resistance training and balance training in our elderly population, irrespective of what your osteopenia or osteoporosis score is, can very much protect you from falls and fractures and ending up in a hospital bed. So I think that's a really big piece that we need to work on. And then looking at what are the other training environments that you can then utilize to get better at that. And I'm a huge fan of water training, aquatherapy.
Swimming.
Because a lot of people can't swim.
Yeah.
Particularly in the subcontinent, a lot of people don't swim and they're fearful of water. But just exercising in water is unbelievable for this, particularly for that cohort that I'm just talking about.
Right.
So getting people into the water environment, into the aquatic environments. You're getting load through the joints and through the bones, which is what you want, but it's not overloading them because you're cushioned by the water. But every movement you do in water is against resistance. So it's a form of resistance training, but in a protected environment.
I see.
And you're more mobile in water, so you're improving mobility. So I think that's an incredible environment. And if you look at, coming back to the swimming, why should swimming be, or learning to swim be compulsory? It's compulsory in every school in Australia. It's compulsory for every child in Australia. One, because 90% of Australia's population lives within 20 kilometres of the sea.
They're always there.
But also because there's 4 or 5 key things that come out of that. One is safety, number one. Every day I pick up the newspaper, there's a drowning here, there's a drowning there, someone fell in, couldn't swim, drowned. That is horrendous and shouldn't happen. So number one, safety. Number 2, social. Particularly in a country like Australia, you are left out of a lot of social environments if you can't swim. Going to the beach, going surfing, going water skiing, going snorkeling, all these things. Fitness, the big one for me as well and for you, as you've just said. So a really safe, excellent fitness parameter is swimming. Okay, so using swimming as a fitness. Competition. So competition, becoming a competitive swimmer and bringing competition into a child's life through the medium of swimming. So, and then what it also does is gives you an opportunity later on in life to have another means apart from walking as you get older to stay fit and healthy. So there's 5 things there why everybody should learn how to swim or at least be comfortable in an aquatic environment. The number one recovery tool we use during the IPL is the swimming pool.
I see.
And so it's compulsory for every hotel. So when we do the recce's before the IPL, I do the recce's of all the hotels. The number one thing it has to have is a good swimming pool because every single one of our recovery sessions takes place in the water. and occasionally training sessions actually occur in the water as well. A lot of the running training,
Got it.
and also rehab. It's a brilliant rehabilitation environment when we're returning to play and returning to sport after injury. So I can't speak more highly of aquatic environments for people to both be functional, to be healthy, to be safe, but also to experience the overall health benefits of. The beauty about swimming, particularly for strokes like freestyle, is that it's a beautiful way to elongate the spine. So for our players who are running and jumping and hopping on hard ground and bowling and doing things where we're tending to compress our whole spine, that's why we use the recovery environment as swimming as a recovery tool, is because it tends to elongate the body, take the pressure off the spine.
Wow.
So that's more the recovery side, but on the fitness side, it's a no-brainer.
Got it. What about walking? A lot of people say I walk for half an hour every day. How good is walking? I know movement is important, but as you're getting older, what does it do?
Walking is life. I think walking. If there's one takeaway that I give everybody is don't stop walking, don't stop moving. Every system is required to function when you move, when you walk.
Right.
So
walking has its benefits.
Lymphatic, cardiovascular, all your muscle pumps, and
your brain,
as I talked about before, the cognitive movement link. And so walking, if there's one exercise that everybody embraces, and there's some really good studies around the benefit of fast walking versus running. It almost outweighs. So the benefit of walking almost outweighs the benefits of running.
Really?
Yeah. So particularly as we get older, because of the joint health sort of conversations and things like that.
So fast walking, brisk walking.
Brisk walking. Yeah.
It looks silly, but it feels good.
It feels fantastic. Yeah. And then they say, well, what's the number? How many steps a day or how duration? But 30 minutes is generally the 30 minutes of brisk walking a day seems to be the sort of common sort of denominator amongst most people.
Right.
And then there was a big debate about 10,000 steps being, you do 10,000 steps a day, you can reduce your cardiac risk by about 40%. That number's sort of pretty fluid. I think the one that they seem to be most, though I see popping up most now, is around 8,000 steps a day of brisk walking.
Brisk walking. Right.
Yeah. Look, any walking's good, but ideally, if it's brisker, then things function a little harder.
Give me 5 things that reverse the new cancer, which is sitting down every day.
Look, we just got up and did it ourselves because we've been sitting for a while and we're practicing what we preach.
You should.
So the number one for me is back extensions. So standing up and getting some good back extensions. Putting your hands on your hips and leaning backwards into it. I love doing quad stretches. So doing it, just standing up and doing a quadricep stretch.
Which is a lunge.
You can do it as a lunge, but
pull your foot back. You mean.
Pulling your foot up into your backside. I love lunging. And I think lunging, because it's a hip flexor stretch as well, which is what we shorten when we sit. So a lunge, and then for me, you can do a basic hamstring stretch as well. So really just sort of bending over, touching your toes, getting your hamstring stretched out. And then don't forget your upper body, because that's also in some pretty poor postures generally as well. So I'm a big one for chin tucks. Mm-hmm. So chin tucks and then and taking hands behind your back and stretching out the front of your shoulders. So if you can just do those, even if it's 3 or 4 times a day, it's going to make a significant impact to how you feel at the end of the day. But if you can do it every hour, then perfect.
Got it. Everyone in our audience and a lot of people are playing pickleball or paddleball.
So I'm smiling.
Yeah. And it's a fantastic thing, obviously.
It is fantastic.
But everybody's getting injured. A lot of work for physiotherapists.
Yeah, that's why I'm smiling. The industry, the allied health industry is benefiting significantly. But you're right. I'm never going to stop people from taking up a sport. And that's not purely from the physical side, but from the social side, the community side. We know it's a big stress relief. Okay, and stress is one of the biggest drivers of modern day disease. So if we can keep that, but try and protect them a little better, so there's less injuries, and that's what our main focus should be. And all that comes down to is being aware of where you are in life, and where you've come from, and being a little bit better prepared for that environment. It's quite a traumatic environment once you get onto the court, particularly when in males testosterone takes over and we really want to
you reach out and
the
use some
competitive,
crazy.
as you said, your sympathetic nervous system takes off. But that's a good thing because we need those stimulants and those stresses as well. But you need to be prepared for them. I just don't think we prepare enough. So the first thing I would do is advise someone to just go and see either a well-trained strength and conditioning trainer or a trainer or a well-trained sports physio and say, I want to go on this journey. What's the 4 weeks leading into this going to look like for me? Because it'll probably take about 4 weeks to sort of be reasonably well adapted to what you're going to be putting yourself on the court. And then when you are on the court, it's not a case of going from 0 to 100. It's a case of spending it might only be 30 minutes, 20 to 30 minutes to start with on first day. What a lot of people do is they go in and play. They love it so much. They play an hour and a half. The next day they feel terrible. Yeah. And so so then they sometimes even lose interest on the back end. So just ease gradually into the actual effort itself. But the preparation is really key. And then have 2 or 3 little recovery strategies that are also going to make you wake up the next morning feeling better. And when you wake up the next morning better recovered, your chances of injury are less, and you're going to go into the next exertion feeling better as well and better prepared for the next exertion.
Right.
But don't stop. I don't want people to stop playing. Just be better prepared to play and appreciate that surfaces have a big impact. What's the surface like? Try and protect yourself with good footwear. That's another thing. So where can I lessen risk? Stay hydrated, be fueled properly, wear the right appropriate clothing, particularly footwear, analyze and assess the surface that you're playing on and be wary that may impact injury, and know where your thresholds are and don't go beyond those initially.
And is a large part of it because of what weakness would you say? Core weakness, glute weakness, shoulder, all of them or what?
And you'll see most of the injuries are things like rolled ankles, twisted knees, things like that. And that's because we're just so unstable on one leg and we haven't trained for it. So when we talked about what conditioning you would do in the gym or with your sports physio, a lot of it be around about being stable and strong on one leg. Because a lot of what you do on that pickle or paddle court is off one leg. You lunge forward on one leg, you take off to the side on one leg, you go overhead on, so you're in unstable environments consistently.
Right.
And when you're unstable, you're at risk of tearing or pulling something. So that would mean just spend a lot more time on your core stability, your single leg stability, and general lower limb strength.
Got it. I want to talk a little bit more about training when, you're in pain. Because as you get older, you're going to have niggles, constant niggles. So how should someone think about being active with these pains? Like what is the mind?
Yeah, what's good pain, what's bad pain? Because there is such a thing as good pain. And whenever you are adapting to a new physical environment, or your body is trying to, there's going to be pain associated with that because there's inflammation associated with that. But that's how the body recovers. That's a signal for the body to recover and grow and get stronger and get healthier. Okay, so moderate amounts of inflammation are required for growth, particularly muscle growth, and even tendon growth. So we need some of that, but you got to recognize what's good, what's bad. When have I overdone it? The general rule of thumb is that if that pain or discomfort restricts ranges of movement of that body part, then you've probably overdone it, and just respect that until it drops down to the point where it doesn't restrict range, or it persists more than 24 hours. So then I'll be saying, okay, I've got to back off a little bit. I've overdone it. Okay. Or if it inhibits any of your normal activities of daily life. So if it inhibits your walking, so you're limping, or you can't go up and down the stairs, or the basic thing, getting in and out of a car, if you're noticing it then back off.
Physiotherapy has advanced so much in the last 20 years. Like I've been seeing physiotherapists on and off for 20 years, and I can see the massive change. A lot of it is from Australia, I've seen. A lot of it is from America. If people want a really good physiotherapist, what should they look for?
Qualification, number one. And I think what separates the good from the very good now is if they've got a master's in particularly sports physiotherapy or manual therapy techniques. most of those will have to be attained overseas. The reason why I say focus on those individuals is because they have very good manual therapy skills. You go into the best physio practices in the world, not just in India, in the world, you will not see a single piece of electrotherapy equipment.
It's all manual.
It's all manual therapy, exercise therapies, soft tissue release, soft tissue work, but predominantly manual therapy. And the skill is in what we call the clinical reasoning for that injury, the why, and therefore the diagnosis, quick diagnosis, and then an intervention straight away. The best physios in the world, and there's a law in Australia that if you can't impact a positive change from the physiotherapy intervention within 3 sessions, you've either misdiagnosed the problem, because that's how good our skill sets are, or your treatment's not appropriate for that diagnosis, and you've got to go back and revisit it or re-refer on. So there's a law in Australia called the over-servicing law, where if you over-service and they're not improving, then you can't do that because you're not benefiting anybody. So good physios will affect a positive change within 3 sessions. Remember that.
Got it.
So that's generally the benchmark.
So, like Djokovic, I heard at 38, he rebuilt his whole plan because he was this power player. And he built it around joint stability and mobility and recovery.
Yep.
So
I just want to look at nutrition.
And nutrition. Aging athletes teach us so much. Ronaldo today in the World Cup. Yeah. What could we learn from all that?
Djokovic particularly, when I don't know whether you've read his book, but when he removed, he had all those breathing issues. So he removed, as soon as he removed bread or any wheat products, solved his problem.
Wow.
Okay. So nutrition, and that's where the beauty of technology and wearable technologies has given us that insight for us to then act upon, and that's what these guys have been doing. They've had insight.
Do all your team members wear?
So we either wear whoops or auras or rings.
Right.
Yeah. More importantly, is they see the data, they see the impact, and so then I start the conversation. Right. It starts the conversation. That look at this. Why is that dropped? And what is the outcome of that? So heart rate variability. Exactly. And bring it back to, what did you eat before you went to bed? I had a high carb meal before I went to bed.
Some sugar.
Exactly. And then I can say, well, because of that, we're going to have to limit your performance the next day because you're at risk of injury, because your cortisol is suddenly elevated.
Or you limit their performance, is it?
We may adjust their training routine.
Right.
So the dashboard comes to me in the morning of a lot of those insights. And then on the back of those insights, we will then look at the training that's assigned for them for the day and make modifications that if we see risk from the insights. So that's
what are the biggest areas that you found which really impact sleep when you get this dashboard in the morning for your athletes?
So alcohol, number one. But they're so good about it now, and they're so well
I'm sure alcohol must not even be a thing now.
It's so well educated. It's coffee now.
It's coffee.
And in fact, restricting their caffeine intake, because some are very sensitive, and that's where the testing can tell us who's sensitive to caffeine and who's not. So I'm glad it's caffeine that's taken over from alcohol, because I love the coffee environment and the cafe type environment that players have embraced. So caffeine.
2 p.m. no after 2 p.m.
Well, for some it's 4. And for others, they're not sensitive at all. But for some, it's 2.
Right.
So we know who they are. Who are the 2 p.m.ers? Who are the 4 p.m.ers? Who are the 6 p.m.ers? But traditionally, it was alcohol that impacted HRV and heart rates. Food, what you eat and when you eat. That's the big one. So that's the piece that we've really changed in our players. And I'm not talking just about our cricketers. I'm talking about all the athletes that I work with. And also intensity of exercise late before you go to bed as well can impact that. And dehydration. So hydration is another one. So they're probably the most obvious ones that we can then, and then there's emotional ones and other things that we need to unpack a little bit if it's not quite adding up. But generally, if we can manage those 3 or 4 variables, you get a significantly different impact.
You said rehydration. Could you tell us a little bit more about rehydration?
Have you ever tested your hydration status before you went to bed in a cold room with AC on and then tested it first thing in the morning?
How do you test it?
We do specific gravity testing, urine testing with our athletes. There are also just tongue touch with a little device that we just do a sweat test.
Oh, I didn't know that.
A saliva test, which tells hydration. And then we also have these really cool urine monitors that go into that sticks in the urinal. And when you urinate into it, it comes up with all different colors. It comes up with a red or an orange or a green light actually on the monitor inside the urinal.
Right.
It's fascinating. But the best one, the most accurate one we use is the specific gravity testing on their urine. And it's incredible. They go to bed hydrated. They're in a cold room overnight with AC on.
20 degrees.
And they wake up and they're in the almost severe dehydration zone.
Wow.
So they think, well, I haven't sweated, it's cold, but I'm still dehydrated. So your body is dehydrating itself just through normal bodily functions. You do sweat whether you think you are or not. So that we need to be really aware of. So getting them to be educated on that. I remember being told once by, again, Professor Tim Noakes. Remember, when you see these guys training, or if you're training and you take your cap off and it's got salt crusted all over it, and you've got, salt crust on your shirt and, from sweating. And people are saying, oh my God, look at all the electrolytes that I've lost in my system. So they go and then really load up on electrolytes, which is that was always a strategy for the high salt sweaters that we see. But it wasn't until I had this conversation with Tim Noakes many years ago, and he said, John, do you think that's the right thing to do? And I said, why do you say that? He said, well, you think about it. And he's a very smart guy. He said, the human body will never get rid of something that it needs. It will only get rid of something that it's already in excess of. And so if you see that salt crusted, that's not because the body needs it. It's because it's already got excess of it already. And so it's getting rid of it. So he said, in that case, I wouldn't reload them with electrolytes. I just reload them with water.
And for a corporate athlete?
Same.
Yeah.
Let's look at you, corporate athletes, exactly the same as I would look at my athletes, because I believe that you need the same recovery strategies, given what you do to your systems. I'm not talking extrinsically about all this, but intrinsically what's going on. Your cortisol levels are going to be pretty similar to my athletes.
Yep.
That's basically what we're trying to control, because cortisol is inflammation.
Right.
Okay, it's a stress hormone. And your sympathetic nervous system is going to be, your autonomic nervous system is going to be primarily driven into the sympathetic zone, which means everything's aroused.
That's my life on one level is activating my parasympathetic.
Exactly. How do I get them
keeping the cortisol balance on one level? Yeah.
So
L-theanine.
That's all I'm trying to. That's the balance we're trying to get.
Right.
And I think if you understand that, then you, and please appreciate that as corporate, particularly C-suite level corporates, don't underestimate how valuable recovery is for you. It has to be part of your routine.
I just want to spend a little more time understanding how people can get so dehydrated when they're not sweating because they're in the AC and they've not done any sweaty activities.
So but your body's still producing heat. Your body is built in order to keep you consuming an enormous amount of energy just to stay alive. You know that, and just to sit upright and stand upright. There's enormous. Your brain consumes enormous amount of energy.
Your brain does, yes.
And so when you produce energy, you produce heat as a byproduct. So heat, so that's basically what your body's trying to do. Is water is used in those processes, right down to the mitochondrial level. It's the fuel of life, really, is water. And so how do we appreciate that? Doing nothing, you're doing something. In fact, your body's doing a lot. And so naturally you will dehydrate through just that process alone. Air moving past your body also takes sweat. Even sweat that you're not really aware of is still being removed from your body by air flowing past it. It's your natural cooling mechanism anyway. So your body will naturally be doing that. So trying to counter that with some sort of equation. Now people say, well, it's got to be 2-3 liters a day, whatever. My general rule of thumb is you drink to thirst.
I see.
Drink to thirst or drink to a signal, the signal being generally your urine signal, okay, or a marker of some sort, in our case, specific gravity. So I drink to markers for our players because everybody's different and everybody's metabolic rates are different, everybody's exertions are different, everybody's exposure to the environment is different. Like my environmental exposure for my guys on a cricket field, we know that at 30 degrees, when you're running in as a fast bowler, the average fluid loss is around about 1 litre an hour.
Wow.
So I know that this guy is running in for an hour and a half in an IPL game. He's about 1.5 litres down when he comes off.
Right.
So I know roughly that. But the same is for you guys. When you walk from here to the metro station or you walk down the road and you're exposed to some of the conditions, then naturally those intakes are going to change. They're going to have to change. But number one rule is drink to thirst or drink to a signal.
Got it.
First generation in the history of mankind that will not live longer than the previous generation. For me, that is frightening. And that's purely on the back of lifestyle and food choices. India, unfortunately, has been inundated with
Diabetes.
Western lifestyle.
Yeah.
Diabetes, because the Western lifestyle has been piled on top of a traditional Indian diet that only catered for certain people in certain regions who are doing certain activities.
Right.
And we've removed activity, we've added something else, and that's a recipe for disaster.
We added McDonald's, removed activity
Everything.
and added bread.
Look at the Lay's chips, and you go into any store now and it's full of pastries and French things that you guys would never have had until, So I'm not worried about the traditional diet, to be perfectly honest.
Yeah.
I think if you go and talk to your grandparents about what they ate when they were growing up, and even your parents to a certain extent, it was what they cooked in more than anything that's probably changed the most.
Right.
So they weren't cooking in safolas and canolas and rice brands and palm oils, and they were cooking in ghee, they were cooking in groundnut, they were cooking in, not so much here, but overseas more in that, olive oils and healthy fats. So I think we've really moved away from, on the back of some really poor science in this 50s and 60s, we've made some very bad decisions, which we're now starting to understand and slowly reverse. And we're seeing that in the recent food pyramid being inverted. Unfortunately, also, we here tend to look to America for the gold standard in a lot of things, but they haven't been. But this is one thing that I think we will all benefit from globally if we embrace it. And it's taken a long time to do it. It's taken 40 years to get that pyramid right.
People talk about all these different longevity markers. So firstly, I wanted to ask you how important, because you've spoken already, obviously bloods are very, very important. But how important are the other things as well to look at?
Yeah, the beauty about bloods is it gives you that extra layer of insight and therefore an actionable outcome parameter that you can work with as well. So there's one thing and one blood test you would do that would probably help you understand the majority of other health implications in your system. It's probably HbA1c. I think it's the most valuable that I look at.
Got it.
And then alongside that, do a fasting insulin. Because one thing to see if your HbA1c is elevated and therefore you're unable to control your blood glucose. But fasting insulin tells you the why. So if you've got really low fasting insulin, so therefore you're not able to take blood glucose out of the blood and put it into the cells, that means you've either got a very lethargic pancreas, and it's just not producing enough insulin. The other side of it is if you've got a lot of insulin in your system and it's very high, you've got insulin resistance, but you've still got high blood glucose, then you've got, as I just said, insulin resistance. It's a bit like having antibiotic resistance. The more and more you take it, the more and more the body fails to see it. And therefore, so elevated insulin with a high HbA1c is the beginning of metabolic syndrome, which then cascades into all the other health problems that the majority of people have.
One thing people ask me, and I'm sure everybody asks you, is about, our diets. A lot of Indians are vegetarian, the region-specific things and everything. And something I find interesting is that, that farming is so new. So I just want you to talk a little bit about what were our diets historically for millions of years and where has carbohydrates come in and they never existed before. I think people don't realize that.
I think the key thing to understand here, park this for now, but just keep the concept of real food somewhere in your brain for now, real food, because we've moved too far away from that. It all comes back to how we have used food over the millennium. the human being or the human genus has been on the planet around roughly 2.5 million years. Agriculture, as we know it today, and therefore the production of grains and then converted into breads and carbohydrates, particularly faster moving carbohydrates, has really only been around about 9 to 10,000 years, roughly 10,000 years. If you didn't fish it or hunt it and therefore kill it, dig it out of the ground or pluck it off a tree, then you starved.
Right.
There was no agriculture as such, except taking something off a tree that was natural, but that had the fiber, it was natural. So that's how we traditionally were. So the majority of what we ate was actually hunted or killed. So therefore, predominantly carnivorous. An occasional herbivore side came in. Now, what are we doing now? Look at where we are in comparison to that. And if we look at the way our pancreas functions and its job and its role in protecting us against blood glucose, we just don't cope. The numbers are staggering. In the subcontinent, it's something like 60% of adults over 50 are now pre-diabetic. And
60%?
Yeah. It is frightening. So above 5.7%. So if you look at above 5.7% HbA1c, that scares the crap out of me, to be perfectly blunt. The other thing that was quite frightening for me is over the last 10 or 15 years, we do blood samples of all our athletes, all our cricketers, every athlete that I interact with.
Right.
And if I go back and look at all their studies, getting towards 20% of that cohort, 18 to 20% of that cohort are some of your most physical beings on the planet, certainly in India.
20%, are you saying 20% of your athletes were pre-diabetic?
Are pre-diabetic.
Are pre-diabetic, wow.
But that is crazy. And so that's what we're dealing with. And so, as we go back and look at how we've changed what we eat over time, that's probably the biggest culprit. And then the way we've maneuvered and manipulated certain grains that we now eat, we've increased the amylopectin A content of wheat, which is the carbohydrate content in wheat, threefold when we we actually radio and what they call radiogenesis and chemogenesis of our wheat plants back in the 60s in order to increase yields. Right. Yeah. Changed the behaviors of those of wheat. So not only we were then told in the late 1970s, early 80s to change our diets and eat more carbohydrates, we were then starting to eat carbohydrates that had threefold carbohydrate contents as well. And if we look at the numbers around what happened around that period in terms of obesity, diabetes, it all exploded.
And so many people I know have given up wheat and they're like, my life has changed, or dairy or whatever.
Effectively, it's the main reason for that is the gliadin component within wheat, not the glutenin component. And so what that means is that you're removing the key inflammatory component and the one that tends to drive your autoimmune system or trigger your autoimmune system, which is the gliadin component of the modern wheat. Right. You go back and it doesn't exist in the previous generation's wheat from the 60s, the Emma wheats and prior to that.
So know your wheat.
Know your wheat, number one. Know your oils, number two. Know your carbohydrates, number three. And know your healthy fats, number four. And I raised that word earlier about real food. And I remember reading this brilliant thing. I can't remember who the author was, but he talked about, people say, well, how do you know real food? And he said, well, when you walk into a supermarket, a traditional supermarket in, say, Australia or America, he said you either go straight ahead or you go right or you go left, nothing in the middle, because everything in the middle is on the shelves is all the processed stuff in a packet, or if you go left, it's normally the fruit and veg.
That's
and all
true,
that.
because it's the cold stuff on the side.
That's right. The deli stuff, like all the the butcher section and the meat section there, and then straight ahead is normally all the cold section where all the dairy and all that stuff. He said, otherwise, don't even.
That's a very good point.
I love that analogy, and I think that's how I best describe it. This is this conversation about craving versus hunger. we've got to get better at differentiating. Now, the human body doesn't get hungry in the physiological sense of the word hunger in under about 12 to 18 hours, unless you're riding the Tour de France or running a marathon or something.
That feeling that you feel.
Yeah.
That I'm feeling
hunger.
right now.
That's not hunger. That is a craving.
Right.
That is a craving for something that we're all addicted to.
Right.
And that is whatever raises blood glucose. Now, when you raise blood glucose by consuming carbohydrates or sugars or
one of these, basically.
One of those things that raise blood glucose, what that does is it triggers a dopamine response in the brain.
Yeah.
Okay, now we all know what happens in the brain.
I'm licking my lips.
With sugar, exactly. So sugar drives the same, lights up exactly the same neural pathways in the brain as cocaine and heroin.
Yeah.
Okay, so effectively what you're doing is you're giving yourself a little fix, and dopamine is such that when you get dopamine, the next time you need more and you need more and more. So it's classic. So then you get a fix, and then you satisfy that fix by giving into your craving, your hunger craving. Your hunger, by having something that then raises blood glucose a little bit again. So you go and have a toast, you'll go and have some more poha, you'll go and have a pastry or a sweet drink or something, and then you get a little fix, and then you just keep. But with that comes insulin.
Right.
Every time insulin goes up, insulin's inflammatory. Now, if insulin's there all the time, it's not designed to be there all the time. Insulin's supposed to come in for short periods and then go away.
Right.
When it's there all day, every day, going up and down in response to this, then it triggers this craving, but it also triggers huge amounts of inflammation in our system. And inflammation is at the source of all disease and all injury. Okay, so that's the piece we've got to be aware of. What drives my glucose up in the first place and therefore drives insulin and drive my cravings, and how do I negate that or offset that? And the best way to offset that is through healthy fats, because they satiate you and they take away that craving.
Right. Healthy fat.
Yeah. Okay.
Avocado.
But once you start breaking that addictive pattern or that addictive cycle, then you'll find you won't get that. You won't be hungry.
It's
you'll
a
be
cycle.
satisfied with
you
just
break
one
it for
or
a
2
week
meals
and then
a
you're
day.
fine.
Yeah.
Or you keep wanting
It's like any
it.
addiction. Once you sort of break through the worst part and you offset it with something else. Acidity, there's a number of sources to acidity, but one of the predominant ones in terms of systemic acidity, the difference between systemic acidity and higher acid levels in the blood versus just having an acidic tummy. They're two different environments, and they both respond to different things. But in general, one triggers the other. So an acidic gut will often then trigger an acidic systemic bloodstream. The majority of oils that we tend to use today, because they're cheaper and they're mass-produced, is what we call our omega-6s and our omega-9s, which are very inflammatory. So, and because they're polyunsaturated, they're very unstable when you heat them as well. So they fracture, those bonds fracture because there's multiple bonded, and when they fracture, they convert to trans fat. So that's the big nasty side. The better oils that produce less acidity in the body and therefore less inflammation in the body are the more stable oils, which are your monosaturated or your saturated. So it's a far cry from what we were told and have been told, is that saturated.
They should put a heart on the oil.
Yeah, but that heart's being removed now on the back of the new studies. Yeah. But traditionally that went on your saturated and monounsaturated, because they're very stable. There's only one bond to break.
So
in a
ghee,
mono.
basically.
Yeah. So ghee, olive oil, avocado oil,
coconut oil.
Coconut oil is fantastic for our southern Indian friends. Up north, probably ground nuts, one of the safer ones that would be used up north, Tikki and say Bengal and those sorts of regions. That'd probably be my big five in terms of stable oils, less acidic, less inflammatory. I think that is the bit that if you're going to change anything in the kitchen right now, that would be it. And then the other one would be going back and just reviewing what else causes systemic inflammation and potential acidity. And wheat is probably the biggest culprit. And I'm not just talking about gluten. I'm just talking about the modern wheat versus the ancient wheats and how during its manipulation it changed completely, particularly on the back of a single protein called gliadin, which then triggers the whole leaky gut syndrome, etc. So there's some really interesting stuff being unpacked around that space. But if there were two things that I would say to anybody about removing from your kitchen, one would be wheat and replacing it with your excellent ancient grains from India.
Millet, foxtail.
Particularly from up north.
Right.
Nachni, jawar, ragi, some fantastic ancient grains. And if you can find it, the ancient emmer wheat, which is the traditional wheat from the biblical days, the big 2.5, 3 meter tall, that and your seed oils, what we term vegetable oils, are actually just seed oils. And I don't know whether you've ever seen the process of getting a rapeseed to the canola oil or the safola oil. It is horrendous. It goes through 28 different chemical processes. In order to chemical processes.
That's the main thing. It's not pressed oil.
Because they're called RBD oils. They're refined, bleached, deodorized. Have you ever tried chewing on a rapeseed?
No.
Which is where it's from. Oh, it is the most bitter, horrendous. Even animals don't eat it. It's that bad. And originally it was produced because of the lack of grease and gear oils during the Second World War.
Got it.
It was actually
lubricant.
It was a lubricant, and it still today is primarily what it is, and we're consuming that.
You know what I've really liked, one thing that we spoke till now about, is when you look at your players, you look at their history, and when you say history, you don't look at their personal history, but where are they from? One of the top players,
badminton player, is in badminton,
right.
And this fellow had a lot of issues with his gut. And we tried this diet, we tried that diet, and we put him onto what we thought would be the best diets for him: anti-inflammatory diet, microbiome studied diet, and then eventually we went back and looked at his genetics from his genetic profile, and it was Kerala based. And as soon as we put him on a traditional Kerala based diet, everything went away. So that's what I'm saying is that's how I need to understand my players, because I can be doing what I think is the best thing, but it's actually not for him. So the greater insights I have, the more I can impact a positive outcome for that individual.
Because that's so interesting, because, we look at when we watch something or read something or go to a doctor as well, it's a general thing that generally this is good.
Exactly.
Probiotics are good, blah, blah, blah. Carbs are bad.
In some cases, probiotics are not so good for some individuals.
Right.
Yeah.
So are you saying that everyone should do a genetic test to see, like my father is from Rajasthan originally, and my mother is from Mumbai, Maharashtra originally.
So which one's dominant?
What am I? You know what I mean? We should do that, is it?
Yeah, particularly if you're starting to have health concerns or health issues. Or
who doesn't have stomach issues?
Well, that's true. That's very true. But a lot of that is not because of your traditional diets. Like I said, it's because we've piled everything else on top of that.
Right.
That you aren't used to, no matter which region of India you're from.
Right.
You are not designed to be consuming all the pastas and pastries and fries and chips and crisps and all those things. Actually, you're not genetically predisposed. And even amongst Indians within India, it's fascinating to see the tolerances. You'll see this on their CGMs, on their continuous glucose monitoring. North Indians consuming rice and the impact on their CGMs versus their traditional roti versus the South Indians. It's very, very different.
Really?
You see South Indian consuming rice, and they don't get as big a spike.
Right.
The majority that I've seen.
Right.
But you give them loads of rotis and they get a big spike.
Right.
You go up north and give them rice and they get a very big spike on it. So even that's why we CGM monitor a lot of our players. Those types of insights tell me how to fuel that individual safely. So he'll get his carbohydrates that are required for performance on the match day. But what type of carbohydrate, I can then advise him about, this is actually better for you. You're going to have a more controlled glucose response rather than a spike and a drop. So those conversations I can then have. And when a player sees what level of detail you're going into, they really open up to you because they know that you're genuinely caring and concerned about them. And talk a little bit about resilience, because I think it's what we strive for in professional sport.
Right.
The more resilient or durable my athlete is, the better chance he's going to stay on the field uninjured and have a longer sporting journey or longevity in the sport field. So that's probably the elixir of what we're all after. Now, resilience really, how often are we exposing ourselves to environments that actually challenge us, particularly physically? And so on the sporting field, we challenge them physically and redefine where their physical thresholds are. If you find someone's threshold and you break them, they know now where their threshold is. And so they now say, actually, I didn't think I could get there. I always tell the classic story that Shane Warne taught me when I was very much younger. And Warnie always used to say, one of the biggest issues we have with sports people, particularly in the subcontinent, sadly, is that they've never been pushed to the edge. So they never know where their thresholds are. So he used to talk about, John, you've got to go to the edge of the cliff. And you don't know where the edge of that cliff is until you actually fall off that cliff, until you fail, and embracing that failure point. And he said, that's okay. He said, it's okay. You go to the edge, whether that be emotionally, whether that be physically, whatever it is, but you have to find, otherwise you're always going to be operating suboptimally. And in performance sport, you cannot be operating at any level. So you need to find where your boundaries and your thresholds are. And he said, John, that's okay, but I'm going to push these guys until they fail, because otherwise they're never going to know where their limits are and they're never going to grow. But he said, if they fall off the edge of that cliff, your teammates have to be there to catch you. Mm-hmm. And he said, that's the difference. They would catch you and throw you back up on the edge again. And then you know. But so sadly, he said, from what I've witnessed, is that teammates will let you fall and climb over you to get up on the edge themselves. So that's the way he looked at it. It really made me think about exploring people's boundaries. And that's what we can do as adults, is actually start exploring our physical boundaries more, pushing those boundaries, because then the natural side effect of that is the ability to then use that cognitively and psychologically to be more resilient as well.
What example could you give for us to push ourselves?
Take the stairs instead of walking up instead of the lift. Something as simple as that.
Right.
You've taken a decision to push your body beyond what you actually wanted to do.
Right.
Something as simple as that. So most of them are going to be physical examples of taking yourself to another physical boundary.
Like a run more?
Yeah, run more. But it can also be doing things like exposing yourself to, if you can't ride a bike, right, I'm going to go and learn to ride a bike. That's a big, big challenge for an adult. You take that on and overcome that, you've now got one more tool in your toolbox of resilience. Same with learning to swim as an adult. There's fear, enormous fear around that. You break that fear cycle, you've suddenly taken your threshold and your boundary of tolerances are so much higher. So these micro shocks, so micro stresses are great because that's how we build resilience over time, but you've got to be open to exposing yourself to those stresses. So physiologically, there's some great research around cold water immersion, CWR as we call it, and challenging your body over time. It's not something you dive straight into. There's a process, as with everything, to get to that. Otherwise, the experience can be just too agonizing for you to continue. But once you get used to it and it becomes a habit and your body adapts to it, then there's a lot of benefit to that. Most kids today have zero tools in there, particularly in their emotional toolboxes, because they've never had those challenges in life. So what we therefore have to do is, how full is that toolbox? And if, God forbid, when they're a bit older in life and they have a trauma in their life, if there's plenty of tools in there to dip into because of experience, and resilience comes from experiences, then they're going to be okay. If they don't, sadly, it turns sour for very many people. Yeah. Tim Noakes is an amazing sports medicine practitioner and professor. He's the one that pioneered all the whole low carb stuff. But he's an ex-elite athlete himself and brilliant sports medicine physician in his 70s now. But he had this thing called the central governor theory around our brains. And he posed this question about, why is it that the brain has this incredible mechanism to self-protect itself, self-protect the body if it sees danger or fears that you're going to hurt itself. So he always posed this question that, when people run these marathons, particularly your amateur marathoners, and, by the end they're walking and then, they hit that wall and they just can't go any further. And then suddenly they see the finish line and they start running again. Now, if you've hit a physiological barrier where there's no chance of your body moving forward, you're never going to be able to run. And often they get up and sprint for that last bit. So he was saying, well, why is that? Why did they hit the wall? And it's because the brain has this thing called this central governor, where if it can't see the finish line, it doesn't know where the finish line is. It thinks that if you continue going as you are, you're going to seriously damage your physiology. So it lowers your threshold, and you hit that and you stop. But when it sees the finish line and it realizes, oh no, I'm not going to damage it. And you can use that in a lot of environments. And we use it a lot in the physical environments of sport. So say, for example, we play most of our games in Jaipur. It's 47 degrees, very dry heat. We step out into that sunshine from the cool dressing room and go, geez, it's hot out here. As soon as you say, my God, it's hot out here, your brain has suddenly lowered
your performance
threshold in order to protect you. Because you've detected a threat, and your body has detected a threat that it could damage itself in that environment. Now, what we do is we train in it and we get better at it. And it thinks, oh, that's okay. And it keeps relying a little bit. So when a visiting team comes, and they've come from they're not used to the dry heat, and they step out there in 47 degrees and they go on match day, because we only arrive normally the day before a game,
Right.
and they go, oh my God, it's hot. We know straight away that we have a 5 or 10% physical advantage over that playing group.
Got it.
Purely because their governor and their central governor has been lowered. Okay.
Got it.
So they're the sorts of things that we're looking at now beyond just, how well they train and, all the things that we're very, very good at. These are the true 1%ers now that we're looking at.
Got it.
So that would be something that I would definitely encourage. So breathe, move, hydrate. The fourth one that we talked on before was read. I wish people read more. I really do. And the one that we just practiced in here is stretch more after static postures.
Amazing. Thank you so much, John. It was fantastic having you.
This has been brilliant. Thank you.
Thank you.
And thanks for broadcasting to the world what I think and you think obviously are really important messages.
Thank you.